Hey team, Kyle here from Border South, and today I want to talk to you about why triathletes should stomp when they pedal. Now this is going to dovetail with the great cadence debate that Cam Watt has put in an article through Trisutto, and also what Brett Sutton's been on about 30 plus years about how we should pedal for triathlon. The first thing I want to raise is the law of gravity. So this is important with triathletes because we're going from the bike to the run. So they act differently on both of those. So with the bike, gravity is our friend. So we need to use it. On the run, it is our foe. So I think that's how you spell foe. So the reasoning behind that is when you're pedaling on a bike, the gravity isn't hurting your body, you're in a supported position. When you push down on the pedal stroke, the forces are going with gravity. So, and that's in our strong position. So when you extend your leg out, that's a very strong position, it's powerful and it's reproducible. So, and this is something to try when you're actually on the bike, particularly in a TT position. If you're pushing down, you can push quite strong. So forget about pushing down and just pull up. So just focus on lifting your knee. So on the clock face, if we've got 12 at the top, 6 at the bottom. So the pushing down happens from 1 to 5. Just focus on the pulling up from say 7 to 12 and just feel how strong that feels. It will actually feel quite weak. So just think, how many times can I reproduce that versus how many times can I reproduce the 1 to 5 position? So automatically pulling up against gravity is actually difficult, and the muscle action is very inefficient in that actual motion. So one of the first reasons that we need to stomp on the bike is that we're using gravity, we're using the muscles in a strong position, and we're not wasting energy pulling up. So once again, this is very different to cycling. We're in a different position. So it's more of an advantage when you're in a flat position, leaning on your elbows, to actually be stomping and pushing backwards. And then on the upstroke, when it's going against gravity, just using the momentum of the pedal, because if you're pushing down on one side, it's actually helping the lever on the other side come up. So you don't need to be adding extra energy on the pulling up side. The other thing that not pulling up will help with is you're actually going to allow your body to recover. So you'll have muscle engagement on one portion of the pedal stroke and a relaxation on the other. So if we're talking about triathlon and trying to be energy efficient, you take whatever you can with regards to rest and recovery. So if you're doing, let's just say 83 RPM, that equals about 5,000 pedal strokes each leg for 1 hour. So if you're cycling for 5 hours, that's 25,000 pedal strokes in a 5 hour, let's just say Ironman. So if you're only pedaling for half of that, it means half of it you're recovering. Now, if you're trying to pedal the whole stroke round and round and round every 25,000, you're probably going to be more tired. So it's easy to conceptualize that. So try not to put in any extra effort with triathlon cycling, because once again, we're going to have to run. So different if you're a cyclist and you can go all out, be using every possible muscle, and you can just get off the bike and fall asleep basically. Once again, we're talking about triathlon, so we're trying to be as efficient as possible, and that's why stomping is going to allow you to be a little bit more efficient in the muscle activity. Now, why is gravity a foe for running? So gravity is acting downwards, so if you have to oppose that in running because you're contacting the ground, the motion that's going to occur is an upward motion when you use strength. So if you're using those muscles to oppose gravity, it's going to be going up. But we want to be going forward. So there's going to be a level of trying to stop yourself from collapsing to the ground but also going forward. So those muscles that we're using in the bike, all the quads, the glutes, all the extensor muscles, we'll still have to use those, but the other muscles like your hip flexors and your tibialis anterior, the stability muscles, we don't want them fatigued as well. So if they're getting relatively a rest on the bike, then they're going to be able to be used to hold your body with stability. So running is about stability. So keeping nice and tall is going to allow you to get through gravity easier. So the more that you end up becoming in this really flexed position, we've all seen it where towards the end of a marathon, people are just bending forward and almost falling to ground because they can't oppose gravity anymore. So being able to stand more upright is going to allow you to oppose gravity easier and allow the motion forward easier. So we want the stomping action of the bike to get us to the run as fresh and as quick as possible, and then we can use the stability to get the run to the finish line as possible. So don't waste the energy of the hip flexors and the stabilizing muscles on the bike. Use them when you need them, which is in an upright position. So if this hip flexor here is being worked and worked and worked and worked throughout the bike, it can't hold you upright. So it's a stabilizing muscle as well as just pulling your knee up. So it's actually quite important to keep your body upright. So to keep your hips forward, you need a good balance between your glutes and your hip flexors. So that's a critical muscle in allowing you to lift your leg, but also keep the stability so you can be in a much easier and efficient position. So that's why we need to stomp with regards to gravity. The other reason that we stomp is because it's more efficient from a cadence perspective. So if we're looking at cadence, we're thinking about stomp, it's a lower cadence. So when we often see cycling, they can be at a higher cadence and we think, oh, well, that's going to be more efficient. Yes, but they've been cycling for a long time and that's all they do. And they don't have to run off the bike. So if we look at just pure numbers based on what's more efficient for cycling, if you're doing a 1 kilometre time trial, it takes about 60 seconds to complete. This is an elite cyclist, and they produce about 1,000 watts. And the cadence is at 130 RPM. Now, the further you go down, so the increase in distance and time, the less you're able to produce the watts, and we'll see a decrease in the RPM for what's most efficient at that. So let's look at the start of a triathlon distance, like an Olympic distance is 40 kilometres. So we'll see what's efficient there. So an elite cyclist will be able to produce that in 50 minutes, and that will be at an average of 400 watts. And the cadence for that is actually going to be around 95. So now we're getting closer to what people are trying to achieve. So you ask yourself, can you produce 400 watts for 50 minutes? Then 95 might actually suit that. Now if we go to an Ironman, let's go to an elite level Ironman that can produce 4 hours 20 minutes. So it's quite a good bike split. They're actually producing about 300 watts for that whole period. And their cadence will be around 80 RPM. So you can see that the RPM is actually coming down for it to be efficient. Now let's look at an age grouper who might go 5 hours 20 at around 210 watts. That's going to be sitting at around 72 RPM. So you can start to look and see, well, where do I sit? How long can I sustain my power? What the duration is? What should the RPM be matching that? And I don't know about you, but it scares me to think about trying to cycle at 95 RPM for 5 to 6 hours. You can just see by the data that it's probably not going to be efficient. So decreased RPM will equal more strength. So that's what we're all worried about. Well, my strength is going to be zapped and I won't be able to run. So this will occur when you're untrained. So when you train your bike to be able to handle a lower cadence and more strength, you start to adapt quite quick. So you're utilizing a strength of our legs, which is that push motion. If you train it well, you can handle a lower RPM. So at the end of the day, we just want the balance between your heart and lungs and your legs. So maybe that'll make it easier. Heart and lungs and legs. So and this is just by, you can judge this by feel. So if you're cycling and you're huffing and puffing and your heart rate's quite high, but your legs aren't really zapped, let's just say you're doing 120 RPM, well, you know that your cardiovascular system is just flogged. So what do? You change into a bigger gear to try and balance it out. Now, if we're going too heavy on the legs or they're not trained well enough, then your heart rate might be low, but your legs are just zapped. So you're going to have to make the resistance easier. So trying to find the balance between both of those is the critical point, and that's how you want to actually race. But if we focus on strengthening this side, then this side is going to be relatively, easy. So your heart rate's going to be lower, which just means less metabolic cost at the end of the day, and it's going to be more efficient. So you want to get to the run feeling like you've got a fresher start to the run. So train the legs, balances this out to be able to handle a lot more. To spend our time trying to get this up and work on a high cadence being efficient, you might have to quit running and swimming and just be a cyclist for 5 or 6 years. Most people probably aren't going to be in a position to do that. So it's going to be very hard to get the gains here, whereas if you do low gear work, if you stomp it, you're going to be able to get far more out of that, and it's going to be far more efficient for you, and you're just going to run off the bike a lot easier. So there are a couple of the theories about why triathletes should stomp it, and I've personally been through it, and I think it works, and it's really simple too. So let me know what you think in the comments below, and glad to answer any more questions or go into a bit more depth. Thanks for listening.